Hello, all you hardcores out there, how are you doing? What a time to be alive. Big Meech is no more. He is now Little Meech. It's Big Porky here. Sunday morning. Thought I'd give Rico the opportunity to come on first today because he started the channel with me nearly 5 years ago. How are you doing, Rico, young man? I haven't seen you for a bit. I thought you'd gone on a Bosman to Sporting Icons.
No, I haven't. I haven't turned into sporty icons. I look forward to. Well, I never really watch his videos, but I look forward to seeing his arguments. He'll probably have good arguments around the fight, and as Matchroom is crumbling, he'll probably be the last rat on the ship, as they say.
Do you think everything we saw leading up to the fight, Joshua knew we were going to be in a fight. The other kid, he's obviously trains very hard. He's mentally very tough and he's very, very strong-willed. The strong-willed people, them Ukrainians, aren't they?
Yeah.
I've noticed, I mean, I know I don't like to bring this up, but I noticed years ago, I always used to say to Karl Froch, Golovkin, Kovalev, you know, these people like these, you know, your Usyk,
Yeah.
What's the secret? And he used to just say, they're tough. They're just tough. They've got that gene inside them. They're from a very cold country as well, aren't they, Rico? But they're tough mentally,
freezing.
And do you think that there's a problem with how our fighters are a bit soft? Because I don't think Usyk's on Twitter at 4 in the morning, is he?
No, I mean, look, I think Terry's actually spoken about this in his podcast, so I'll steal a few thoughts from him, but I'll add a few of my own. So I think generally, if you think about boxers, right, the best boxers in the world are from really tough places and tough upbringings. Streets of Mexico, Canelo wouldn't have had it easy growing up. Manny Pacquiao, Philippines, leaving home at 12 to become a boxer. Like, fighting's the only way out. And even if you look at Ukraine, Russia, to be the best fighter there and the way they train, the conditions they train in, the lifestyle they have, for you to be the toughest man in that country, you know, you are already one of the toughest men on the planet, right? Yeah. Nobody from Team GB, nobody from England, hardly anybody in modern day England, right? Modern day England. We don't really have, we obviously have poverty, but what I'm saying is, like, we don't have that kind of environment that what they have in Russia. So a council estate in England is going to be a lot better than any, you know, council estate in Russia or Ukraine.
Well, look where they sent Dave Allen to train. He thought he were a prison.
Yeah, and you look at the training conditions, like the gyms in England, they're in a lot better condition than the gyms that these kids have been training in. So these guys are like tough, mentally tough, physically tough, used to conditions, and they all from that Soviet era of training, which is, you know, if your hand is sore one day, you're not going to not turn up to training. You're not going to skip, you know. It's kind of brutal mental, psychological, and physical training. So I think in general, what we're seeing in boxing is, as the UK becomes more affluent, I mean, that's debatable on a number of levels, but, you know, the chasm between the lives that people in Russia and Ukraine and Philippines and Mexico have versus what the poor kid in the UK have are huge, right? And that means that they just breed very tough people from very tough backgrounds, and they end up, you know, and it shows in the ring. And, you know, you saw in after the 9th round, Usyk was clearly hurt, right? Usyk was gone. Joshua just couldn't stop him. And the way he came back, and, you know, there was something in his eyes and something in his body language which said, I'm going to fight for something bigger than myself. I'm going to fight for my country. And after the fight, you saw, you know, the guy doesn't have any emotions generally, but you saw him kind of, he did it for his countrymen.
I think he was upset then because it was a relief, because he thought, you know what? I think they're going to shaft me here.
Yeah, I mean, look, the scorecard from Glenn Feldman was disgraceful.
5 rounds to Joshua out at first 6. That's got to be corruption or incompetence.
Well, the funny thing is, Steve Gray scored it relatively fair, right?
He bottled it, didn't he? He went ringer, they stuck in, had his mate, and he looks like he filled his nappy.
But imagine if he would have scored it the other way. Joshua would have won that. Yeah, I mean, Joshua would have won that fight on a split decision. And would have he given Usyk a rematch? I doubt it, right? Usyk isn't the guy that you really want to be the heavyweight champion because he doesn't bring money. He doesn't speak good English. He's not known
It
beyond
was all
boxing.
stacked against him, wasn't it?
Everything was stacked against him. I mean, he came from whether he was on the front lines or not, again, that's what he claims. I mean, anyways, he was in Ukraine. His headspace probably wasn't the same as any other camp he's been in his life. He's 35 years old. He's coming off a nearly 1 month layoff. So I think for him to come and perform the way he did, which I thought was his probably his career best performance, because the Brady's fight was tough, but this was against a bigger man. He was really visibly hurt. So I thought that was an incredible performance from Usyk. And I mean, credit to him. I think rather than always looking at the faults of Joshua or what was done wrong, sometimes you have to remember that, you know, Usyk fought at a very high level. And I was one of those people that said that he wouldn't make it heavyweight. So, you know, he's proved that he's an elite heavyweight, and I'd fancy him against more or less any of the heavyweights of today.
Yeah. Let me just point out what people we were talking earlier about training camps and that, right? Usyk's training camp. Well, we saw it, didn't they, on the first fight? He was sleep. I don't know about this one, but this camp, but the first camp in Ukraine, because he has horses and that. Yeah. He was sleeping in a barn with his horses, wanting for the full camp. Now, obviously, the guy's not bothered about cold weather and that, because I've read a lot about Kovalev, and his camps were very similar. They were making them they were making them stay out in snow and that, weren't they, and train and all that as kids from being young. So when Teddy Atlas, who you got me watching Teddy Atlas stuff, and I'm a massive fan of his. I think he's one of most people in boxing that's got a lot of integrity, a bit like Julian in this colour, Julian McGowan, because people were putting forward for Julian to be on board, weren't they? Because he's got a lot of integrity. Well, he's the same in the Atlas. He lost a job, didn't he, for his opinion at EIS? He was well paid, wasn't he? Now, Teddy Atlas talks about, we're firefighters and we're going into the fire and we're going to put the fire out. Now, when Billy Joe fought Canelo, he'd never been in a firefight. No. Sex achieved so much in 20 fights, but his firefighting were done as a young boy, wasn't it? Their firefighting, they grabbed him then and said, look, we're firefighters, we're going to put fires out. And he went into the furnace yesterday, and it were no to Usyk, it were food and drink, wasn't it? Joshua, he was going back to his corner. He didn't know where he were, did he? Yeah, look, I think one of the things with boxers is, in this country, you might be from a tough upbringing, tough estate, you know, not had life easy. You go to your local amateur gym, whether that be in Yorkshire, London, wherever that might be, you train there, you do really well. Then you get to the EIS system, which is luxury compared to most boxing systems in the world. And then from the EIS, you get signed to Matchroom or another promoter, and you're fighting on these big cards. You've got the red carpet, you've got everything, you know, laid in front of you. So as he said, that being tough as a kid, you haven't been tough for the last 10, 15, 20 years of your life, right? You haven't had that same thing. Whereas these guys like Usyk, Kovalev, you know, a lot of the Eastern European guys, they will make sure that they stay in that tough environment throughout their careers, because they know that if they go into that luxury lifestyle, that old Marvin Hagler saying about silk pajamas, then they know that they lose their edge. So because they've never worn those silk pajamas, they will never have that feeling, right? They'll have the same hunger. Yeah. And I think that happened to Carl Froch at end, you know. And he won't mind me saying this. We all know that the Froch Groves, the first one, you know, I'll do a run on treadmill today, and not the 6 mile run that he used to do with his mate Adam round where he lives. Little things like that creep into end. I've spoken to Clinton Woods about it. He said on my channel, he was doing his runs at Ridgeway up Derbyshire. Some mornings he just wasn't doing like 6 mile, might do 5.5. But it can play on your mind, can't it, that when you're a boxer? And I think when Froch fought Groves the rematch, there were none of that. Because it has to be in here. A lot of it's mental. And do you know who say? I think he's that good. I think he'll go down as a legend. But getting back to toughness, and we're talking about Joshua, he's had everything done for him since they were at EIS. Yeah, he's supposed to be this thug guy, this and that. He did 2 weeks in Reading Prison. Do you know Reading Prison? You've got a TV and a PlayStation, and you've got phones in your cell. on pin. I don't know if they had them then, and you're on like a pin them, so you got a phone in yourself, TV and a PlayStation. That's not jail. Can you imagine the jails where you Usyk's from?
Yeah, but you know what? It doesn't. You don't have to go to jail to be tough. I don't think that. But what I mean is like, and it's not. This isn't Joshua's fault. I think Joshua showed toughness towards the end of the fight to get through the fight because he was out after round 10, right? 10, 11, 12, he was gone more or less, Joshua, right? And he was getting plummeted, even if you look at the punch stats and the eye test. But it's just more a case that in this country, there are many fighters when they get to the top that they decide to go, they decide to go to Big Bear and train up there, or, they decide to leave everything behind and, go and train in tough environments. And it's not really encouraged either. I mean, no trainer's telling their fighter because no fighter wants to hear it. You know what? Don't train in the UK. We're going to go to Russia, well, not Russia anymore, but we're going to go somewhere in the world to a very tough environment, train there, live very basic lifestyles. Even someone like, these American fighters like Wilder and others, they go specifically to places in the middle of nowhere, away from their family, and train there in solitude and, have very basic lifestyles. Maybe they'll have somebody, nutritionists obviously cooking them nice food, but everything else is sort of focused on training, nothing else.
Dennis was a big fan of warm weather training, Dennis, when I was up there.
Yeah, I mean, look, even if it's warm weather training, but as long as you're not going to the beach afterwards.
Yeah, they like
yeah, if you're not going to the beach afterwards, or, you're not going for a nice meal and stuff, it's more about having the isolation and, having to train really hard in physically harsh environments.
Yeah. I noticed another thing about them sort of boys. They're not big on social media, Usyk. I know you.
He doesn't speak much English, does he?
Yeah, I know, but all these top pound for pound guys, Usyk, I know you, Spence, Crawford, Lomachenko, all these sort of geezers. They're not shouting their mouths off on social media. They don't carry off like that, do they?
No, but it's partly. I mean, Spence does it, and Crawford.
Do they shout off?
Sometimes on Twitter, but you know what? It's more also where you're from, right? In Russia, for example, in Russia and Ukraine, the main social media channels that people use are Telegram and what's it called? V Connect.
Yeah.
So they don't use the same social media channels as we do. But generally, like, if you look at Usyk, it's not in his character to be on social media and post funny things or comment or engage with fans. They are fighters first, they are family men second, and they are entertainers third. And after you do those two things first, you have no time for the third. Whereas a lot of British fighters, and this is partly the fault of Eddie Hearn, I'd say. Eddie Hearn has created this image that as a fighter, you should be constantly out there promoting yourself, selling yourself. When you do have the biggest fight of your career, then you should absolutely not focus on that. You should only focus on one thing. If you are Bill Gates and you're building a business, or whoever it might have been, Jeff Bezos or whoever, do you think back then, if you had social media, they will be on social media all the time, as well as spending every day building your business? And this goes for everything in life, right? If you're really single-minded and super focused on one thing, then everything else is relevant.
Yeah. The fight itself, how did you score it?
Let me get my notes up.
Rico's got notes. He's all organised. Porky hasn't got notes.
No, I did.
Too much.
So I gave Usyk one of the first 3 rounds. Then I gave Usyk the 4 rounds after that. Then I gave Joshua the 8 and the 9s, and then I gave 10, 11, and 12 to Usyk. So that means I gave Joshua a total of 4 rounds. Some were close, some were closer, but I gave Joshua a total of 4 rounds. I could see why you'd give Joshua 5 rounds and Usyk 7 rounds, but at the end of the day, I mean, it wasn't close to a draw. And I think if you watch that fight, Joshua in the first 3-4 rounds, but he had a better posture. He was keeping low. He's using his jab well. both of them. I mean, Joshua was doing good body work throughout the fight, I thought, but it dipped that point, and then he started pouring with his jab as the fight went on, and going back to the Joshua that we saw at the Tottenham Stadium last year, where he was reverting back to type, and that was partly because he was so tired. So I thought the first 4 rounds, that was the game plan. Then Joshua changed to fight it another way, and then when he had nothing left, he was just running on empty.
We're hoping for scorecards to save him money.
Yeah, and you know what, Usyk, credit to him. I mean, he was very tired, and I thought after round 9 that Joshua could potentially take him out, but Joshua couldn't. Every time Usyk was hurting every time Usyk was hurting on the ropes, he'd just move to the right, and Joshua couldn't do anything. And he'd do very clever tricks, and then. But I think Joshua was much improved from the first fight. He was moving he wasn't reacting to everything Usyk did. He was negating a lot of the stuff Usyk did. And Usyk used a lot of energy through a lot more punches than Joshua. Joshua was working the body well. But I don't know whether Joshua just doesn't have that power at the top level to hurt a guy like Usyk. And Usyk is very clever at riding shots. And whether also... I said this today to Terry and somebody else. I just said, I think 9 times out of 10, if these guys fight, Usyk will win. I just don't think there's any way for Joshua to beat Usyk unless he gets very lucky. Even if Usyk's hurt, he can ride it out. I mean, we just have to accept that Usyk is a much better boxer, superior boxer, has a better gas tank. And if Joshua can't take him out in the first 6-7 rounds, there's no way of Joshua winning that fight.
Compubox stats, Rico. Some people like them on channels. Some people go, okay, not Compubox stats. Yeah, Compubox stats. We're putting them on. If you don't like it, jog. Rico, get the stats out. Let's have a look.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's probably worth calling out is that between rounds 4 and rounds 4 and 8, Usyk outlanded Joshua in every fight. And then if you look, every round. Then when you're looking at like round 10, Usyk had 39 punches landed. Joshua had 10. Round 11, Usyk had 23 punches landed. Joshua 10.
So
the body shots,
Joshua's output altogether, how many punches did you land?
Oh, well, Joshua had 492 punches. Usyk had 712. Joshua landed 124. Usyk landed 170. Joshua landed more to the body, and Joshua landed more power punches. But I think some of the stats, like a lot of Usyk's jab wasn't meant to hurt Joshua. It was a distraction, right?
Yeah.
Trying to hit between.
Punch, innit?
Yeah, he was trying to jab between the guard and then hits across, hits around the guard, right? That's what he was doing a lot. The other thing is he was using the jab to essentially, when Joshua had the high guard, to put the glove here so Joshua can't see and then try and work other things in. But Usyk had a much higher punch output, and when Usyk needed to go up a gear, he was able to do that, and that was particularly round 10, 11, 12, just to make sure that he won that fight. Whereas Joshua used his, the most punches he threw was round 9 when he hurt Usyk. He landed 28 from 67 punches. After that, he threw a lot of punches, but he was quite spent, not accurate.
Do you feel that Joshua, he always tends to base things? I've heard this off a couple of people, that he looks at an opponent and he compares them physically and strength-wise and athletic-wise, compares them to him. He might be able to do 100 meters quicker than them all, lift more and that, but if you can't fight at their level, you're still not going to win, are you?
Yeah, I mean, that's true, but I think it's only natural as a human, right? You see Porky, you see like a mini Porky, a very small guy. He's running off his mouth. You'll take your chances. You see someone like Richard Towers, you might be a bit more cautious about it, right? And that's just human nature.
Yeah, because Richard Towers will come through your front door.
Yeah, well, that's it.
Well,
that's it. I mean, it's just an analogy that not Richard necessarily, but anybody else. That's how the humans are. And I also think in the first fight, what Joshua saw, he didn't see anything that he thought he couldn't beat with a good performance. I thought he was round 6 or 7. Before Joshua went back to the corner, he dipped his head looking at away like, Christ, this guy is good and there's nothing I can do to answer this guy, because Usyk started going up the gears after round 3. And there was a point where Joshua looked like he lost a bit of confidence. And I think Joshua as a fighter fights on confidence. So he needs to get, he needs to see you hurt. In round 9 when Joshua hurt Usyk and he was smiling at him and coming at him, Joshua needs that confidence boost in the ring to continue to do what he's doing. And when something isn't working, he's not the quickest fighter himself to figure out what's not working. And even if the corner was telling him, throw more double jabs, it's not easy for Joshua to implement that. Like he needs to be in his rhythm and then he'll be able to implement things. But generally for him to do something different, he's not the most adaptable fighter in fights. And we've seen that many times, right? If something doesn't work, Joshua is not going to solve the problem in the ring.
Do you feel that Joshua's been careful in match, Rico, from day one?
He has, but you know what I think is overachieved? If you think about guys like Tony Yoka that have better amateur pedigree and more training, Yoka's lost to Bacoli. I think about guys like Luis Ortiz might have not got the same opportunities. I think they've known that there's been vulnerabilities and they've known that Joshua isn't maybe what they've marketed him as. And that's why they've managed his career carefully. So I actually think Joshua's overachieved in his career, right?
Yeah.
He's overachieved in comparison to what his talent is. You look at someone like Frank Bruno, you drop Frank Bruno into today's heavyweight era, Frank Bruno would be definitely a contender, but Frank Bruno didn't have the same career and the same money as Joshua had in the end. Whereas Joshua's had a good career considering a lot of the weaknesses that have been there, that have been exposed. And also, look, he's a youngish heavyweight in the sense that he's still got time left. He can have a second run of trying to win another title. He can, he can still improve as a fighter. But I just feel like the marketing has been way ahead of where he's actually as a fighter.
Yeah. He's not a Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods talent-wise, but he's up there with earning potential, isn't he?
He is, and also the heavyweight when he sort of took over from Klitschko, put it this way, and Fury was out for a while. Less said about that, the better. So I feel like that was a perfect time for him to reign because there wasn't that tough competition. Usyk was still a cruiser. And then since then, he lost to Ruiz, but he faced, the toughest guys he's faced on his resume are Klitschko, White, and Usyk. Klitschko was washed up. White was a novice. Usyk, probably at the peak of his powers as heavyweight, or maybe 1-2. Yeah, he's a cruiserweight. Yeah, he's a big cruiserweight, isn't he? So Usyk is the best fighter that he's faced at that stage of their career. And I think that version of Usyk might have struggled with the version of Klitschko that Joshua fought against. But I think Usyk just stylistically is an absolute nightmare for Joshua. He doesn't like to punch down. He doesn't like to fight against smaller fighters. Yeah.
Not threatened, is he, Usyk?
No. Usyk's happy to... We heard yesterday, and we'll go to Fury in a bit, but Usyk's happy to fight against everyone. He's a real fighting man, right? He doesn't shout his mouth off. He doesn't tell people he's a fighting man. He doesn't tell everybody he's a warrior and all that stuff.
Barbarian.
He's happy to fight against everyone, right? He beat Joe Joyce in the amateurs. This is a guy that beat Joe Joyce in the amateurs, another big fighter. In the amateurs, in the World Boxing series, the amateur sort of pro style tournament, Usyk fought against the top heavyweights in the world, and he beat most of them handily, right? So Usyk is used to fight against bigger men.
Yeah. Where does Joshua go from here now?
I think the White rematch makes sense. I mean, put it this way. If you look at that performance from Joshua yesterday, which heavyweights do you think would have been able to beat that version of Joshua yesterday?
I think Wilder beats him. I think he'd have got to him, knocked him out.
Well, potentially, but
Eh?
I think potentially, but I thought that version of Joshua looked better. So I think Wilder might have, Wilder might have wilted at some point, but it's more whether Wilder can land a punch, and that's always been the Wilder thing.
Joshua's not been hit by anybody like Wilder, has he yet? Really?
No.
I think Wilder would take him out. I don't think Dylan White would.
No.
I think who else was there?
Well, we saw Hrgovic yesterday struggle against Zhang.
Forget him now. Forget him. He got beat him, Hrgovic. He got robbed against that Zhang. Joshua's beat Zhang, hasn't he?
Yeah, in the Olympics.
He was the only one he beat, really, out of the 4-1 he really, because the other 3 were count-back results, weren't they?
I mean, he didn't beat Camarelli, but I can't remember the other ones.
Cuban.
Yeah, Cuban. Yeah, that was another close fight.
He got robbed. The Cuban got robbed in the first one, and then he beat the Chinaman. I forgot who the other one were, but Camarelli were at end. But they'd had a few battles there, hadn't they? And I thought he lost.
Yeah.
I thought he lost it on count-back. Being openly, I thought the other kid nicked it, but it was
I thought Camarelli, when I watched it, I thought Camarelli won. Again, Joshua was relatively raw then, but hometown cooking going on in London 2012.
Right after the fight, we're getting to the main bit now. Obviously.
So sorry to answer your question. I think he fights against White next. That makes fair sense on a DAZN pay-per-view. White against Joshua, grudge match. Both of them are in that right space. I think it would sell a lot in the UK. People would be interested. And then hopefully Fury fights against Usyk. And then if Fury wins, then I assume Joshua will win. So then Joshua Fury makes sense. Again, as another, big payday. And then at the end of that, Fury can say, I've beaten everybody in my era. And then Joshua can say, well, I fought against everybody in my era. So I'm going to ride off to the sunset.
Except Wilder.
Yeah, Wilder. Yeah, that's another one.
We remember what Barry Hearn said when Wilder put Audley Harrison on the moon, don't we? He said, we're not going to put Joshua near him at all. Didn't want to put him near him.
I can see why.
I can see why. Where does this leave Derek Chisora? Because people were saying, Derek's trying to get a fight if Joshua loses tomorrow night against Usyk. Derek's trying to get into position. He wants a pension fight. Would Eddie put Chisora in with Joshua?
Chisora in with Joshua.
How could they sell that?
I mean, that's another one, right? That's another fight. If you don't go for White, you go for Chisora. Chisora has a big backing. A lot of people like Chisora, a lot of casuals. War, Chisora, all this chats, right? Ex-Finchley fighters fight against one another. So I think that fight makes sense. There's money to be made, and it's a good fight to build Joshua's confidence up. And, the press conference will be exciting. And we know they mates, but whatever, it's the usual stuff to sell fights.
Now, I want to talk now. We'll come on to the lickers in boxing, and there's been that many that have come out. Because everybody's trying to protect the positions now, aren't they? I've noticed this morning about what's been said, and there's been a lot of backtracking, hasn't there? Have you seen it?
Yeah, I mean, look, it always happens. And I think, what I think is actually interesting here. So Sky was sharing a lot of the video clips of Joshua's tirade after the fight, right?
I thought they'd just cut it straight off. If he'd have been with Sky, we wouldn't have seen that.
Yeah, but they're sharing it on their social media. That's why I thought it's interesting. Yeah, and the reason they are doing it is they're basically driving his value down for him to go to DAZN. And I think what's going to shift in the British media is we all know there's lots of stories about Joshua which are not in the papers, right? We all know the stories, lots of them. I think this is going to be the David Beckham moment for Joshua. Remember when David Beckham got sent off against Diego Simeone, and then the papers turned on him. So this will be the moment where the papers will start turning on Joshua.
Well, they've got to do, haven't they? After that, he's got to be on a charge with board, hasn't he, for starters?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more a case that Joshua, that the papers will see, well, Joshua's on the downside, so let's sell some papers using his name and get every bad story about him. And he might become a bit like the heel, like a bad character in boxing, and he might redeem himself. So he might become what Tyson Fury was before Tyson Fury became the mental health advocate and truth seeking, whatever.
I'm not bought into any of that. And you know what? All that will come out one day in the wash if it's not already coming out now. Right. Do you think the stories are going to come out about Joshua? Obviously, we know about the Audemars watch, don't we? 2-week morning, week before Povetkin fight, what they're doing out around Battersea, because he got his watch robbed, didn't he? And his mates. So, because that all got hushed up. A lot's been hushed up, and I bet there's a stack like that in Fleet Street on him.
Well, yeah, I think this stuff is going to come out, right? But some of it will be like, what's of public interest? There might be, the next thing you know, there'll be stories around when Joshua goes partying with AK Skins and others and women.
I want to hear about all that. I want to know where
that's going to come up. But in some ways,
well,
that will help his story to become the bad guy and the bad boy, right?
Yeah.
The mask has slipped. Now he's like back to the
like
old
Tyson
Joshua.
and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. So they'll make him out to be that way. But that's, I genuinely don't think he's a bad lad. It's just a guy, he's just a guy from the estates and he's pretending to be all corporate and everything else. And I think that's the thing that that's the thing that a lot of boxing fans haven't liked. So I think this is more a case that the public will see the true Joshua, not the motivational speaker, the inspiration, the guy with the deep quotes and everything else.
Right. He's lost the fight on points. The dummies come out, toys out the pram, he's headed for door. Right, I've heard 2 stories. One, Barry Hearn's supposed to have got involved to get him back here because they've got contractual obligations, haven't they, with media and that. I've also heard that, the security there, they made him go back, the Saudi security. So who made him go back to the ring, do you think?
Well, he looked like he was willing to go back on his own, but I thought it might be, I wouldn't be surprised if it was the security as well, because...
Or did his head just go?
I think his head just went. So I think he thought he was going to win the fight, right? So I think security might have made him come back. He might have, but that's irrelevant, right? Whether he's back in the ring for the photos. And I think what they wanted is really a photo op, right? Both of them holding a belt, hugging each other. But regardless of him going back in the ring, it doesn't justify the way he behaved in the ring. But maybe we'll pick up if I join the other link and we'll continue this conversation.
Yeah, okay then. Okay.
All right. Speak to you in a bit.